This is Abnormal Entertainment.
Ladies and gentlemen of the internet.
This is Steve's house.
Mr. Stevie Wonder. Mr. Stevie Wonder. Mr. Stevie Wonder.
It's the Year of Living Stevie.
Mr. Stevie Wonder. Mr. Stevie Wonder.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Year of Living Stevie. I'm your host, Daryl Bean. Today we got a really exciting episode featuring Hammond organ whiz Jim Alfredson, and that's not an exaggeration. When you hear him play in a little bit, you're going to see that he is a wizard on that thing. It's pretty intense, pretty cool stuff. Real glad that you're here with us today. Episode number 6. It's kind of cool that we've had so many episodes and so many cool things and so much more to look forward to as well. Before we get into the interview with Jim Alfredson, I wanted to try something too, kind of experimenting with some different segments, and I thought it might be kind of fun to talk a little bit about something I call Hidden Stevie. Of course, Stevie Wonder has a long, kind of a very, very deep discography. The albums in the 70s, of course, are legendary, but he's got a lot of work from the 80s and 90s and up into the 2000s as well, and then work before that as well. So there's certainly enough recorded output to keep you busy with Stevie Wonder, but Stevie also has a habit of showing up on some of his friends' albums. I know that was when I was a youngster, just starting out as a musician, and I was in my first real band. My pipe dream was that we'd become famous enough that we could have Stevie Wonder play drums on one of our songs. So Stevie will show up very frequently on other people's albums. So that may be kind of fun to highlight some of those appearances. So for today's Hidden Stevie, I chose a track from Elton John's album Songs from the West Coast, which is a super great record. If you're a Elton John fan or just a fan of songwriting and great pop music in general, Songs from the West Coast is a sleeper. It's a really, really great record. And Stevie appears on this song called Dark Diamond, and here's a little taste of that. Hey, just from that little bit, you can clearly hear that Stevie playing the clavinet on that track, and it's a super funky song that really, really, Stevie brings a lot to the table on. So it's really, really great. The thing that I learned from this track, if you listen to the whole song, go look it up on YouTube or stream it or go buy it or something. One thing I noticed is that the clavinet would do these little bend things, and I learned about this piece of equipment called a castle bar that usually fits to a clavinet. Now, if you're not familiar with what a clavinet, the Honor company, who makes all kinds of different instruments, everything from kazoos to harmonicas to keyboards, Honor had made this instrument that was supposed to basically mimic the sound of a harpsichord. So it's got strings on the inside and it's got pickups, kind of like an electric guitar. That's the clavinet, and there's several different models of it. Stevie's probably best known for playing the clavinet C, whereas the most popular model is the D6 clavinet. But it's just got this really, really unique character to it. But the thing is that when you play a clavinet, you get a note. There's no way to really bend or alter the pitch on the instrument. You press the key and you get the note, and that's how it goes. So Stevie's clavinet in this song is fitted with this basically kind of like on a guitar, a whammy bar, or which is a device that lets you bend the strings in real time while you're playing the instrument. You hear it all the time, in songs not songs, but just hear it in Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen was a guitar player that really kind of popularized the use of the whammy bar. And you hear it in all different kinds of music, but it's this real distinct character, sort of a sound. And it took forever. I was trying to figure out, how is he bending the pitch on these? Is it an illusion? Am I not hearing it right? What's the deal? And after a little bit of research, thank you, Internet, I found out about the Castle Bar, which is basically a whammy bar that fits onto a Honor clavinet. So that's how Stevie got all those cool little bends and stuff like that. Stevie also plays a totally killer harmonica solo. If you're a student of improvisation and you're trying to find things to listen to and to transcribe, as a lot of people do when they're learning how to do solos. This is a really, really great solo because it's just a study in developing a melodic idea in this really short span of time. It's got all kind of cool little flavor in there. So why don't we check out that solo real quick? Dang, that's tasty. Whew, tell you what. So it's a great song, and the whole album is really spectacular. It's Songs from the West Coast by Elton John, featuring the song Dark Diamond, which has our friend Stevie Wonder on the clavinet and the harmonica. All right, well, let's get into it. My guest on the show today is the amazing and wonderful Jim Alfredson. Jim is a Lansing, Michigan-based keyboardist, but has a international profile for writing for Keyboard Magazine and his performances with various artists, as well as his recent viral video where he took Wolfpack's Corey Wong and laid down some super funky organ on top of it that got almost 6,000 views and counting on YouTube at the moment. Jim is also a founding member of the band Organissimo, which kind of takes the organ trio format, the famous organ trio in jazz, and kind of expands on it and extends the boundaries of what you can do on that. He's also a progressive rock keyboardist and has a project called THEO, THEO, that's done some really, really amazing stuff and got to start in the band Root Doctor, which is pretty well known around the state of Michigan. Jim and I had a really, really great talk about the state of the art of keyboards and Stevie Wonder and music and about his upbringing. So I'm really looking forward to bringing that to you. So without any further ado, here is Jim Alfredson. All right, so today on the podcast, our guest is Jim Alfredson. How you doing, Jim?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me over here in your the keyboard heaven dungeon down here. It's pretty great.
Keyboard dungeon.
Looking around here, as a keyboardist myself, going, "Ooh, I wish I had that." So why don't you tell people a little bit, in case they're unfamiliar with your career and the things that you do, like some of the projects that you're working on right now?
Sure. I'm probably best known as a Hammond organist. I've led a trio called Organissimo since 2000, and we've done 6 records and toured the world, mostly the States and Canada, but over to Europe and Israel, actually. The band just released a new CD called B-Threedles, which is a tribute to the Fab Four.
I was listening to that on the way over here, actually.
Cool.
I was kind of digging that. So
yeah, it's our interpretation of some classic Beatles songs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's done pretty well. It hit number 5 on National Jazz Radio and got a really nice review in Jazz Times Magazine, which we're very proud of. So that's doing well. I also have a band called Jim Alfredson's Dirty Fingers, which is my side project for doing stuff that doesn't necessarily fit into the Organissimo band. The Organissimo, I guess, style.
Like more of it, Organissimo would be more of like a traditional, organ trio. So the Dirty Fingers, what style of music would that come
Actually, it's
to?
kind of opposite. The Organissimo, we tend to try to push things a little bit. So we use synthesizers and try to take different types of music and put them into a jazz context, but then also do kind of some fusion-y stuff. And so it's not necessarily a traditional organ trio, whereas the Dirty Fingers is more traditional.
Oh, okay.
Doing 60s, soul jazz and stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then my other personal project is called THEO, and that's a progressive rock project, so kind of inspired by my love of 70s English progressive rock, like Genesis and Yes and King Crimson and Floyd and all that kind of stuff. So.
Right on. So, and in addition to all that, as if that wasn't enough to keep you busy, you also have a pretty busy schedule as a sideman with other artists. Like, for example, this upcoming weekend, you're going to Ottawa, right, to play with Thornetta Davis.
Yep.
Who are some other artists that you've played alongside of?
I've been playing a lot with local Detroit act Laura Rain and the Caesars. I played a lot with Sean Dobbins, a great jazz drummer out of Detroit. A lot with Jeff Schaup, a great jazz drummer here in Lansing. Jim Cooper, the vibraphonist, originally from Chicago, now on the west side of Michigan. So yeah, I'm kind of a gun for hire. Like, if I'm available and the gig sounds cool, I'll do it.
Very, very cool. Very cool. On your and your sideman dudes, what would be your favorite? Like what artist or what gig is kind of your favorite as a sideman?
People used to ask me that a lot because in the 2000s I was in the local band Root Doctor. For about 10 years, and at the time I was doing Organissimo as well, so people would ask me, well, what's your favorite style of music to play, Organissimo or Root Doctor? And I said, man, it doesn't matter. If the music's happening and the people are cool and the gig is fun, I'm happy. I don't pick favorites,
You don't have a seed
no,
for it, so to speak.
I just like to play music, and if the music's good, then I'll play it,
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, somebody had asked me today, like, what my favorite episode of this podcast was, and they're all so different. And I like them all for such different reasons. I'm like, well, I love Dennis Coffey because I learned all this stuff about Motown. But I also
played with him actually. That was an amazing gig.
Oh, he's something, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, really amazing. So yeah, I learned a ton from him. And then this reggae band, Leaving Lifted, because the drummer was this encyclopedia of reggae, and I wasn't expecting that. I just learned all this extra stuff, and the songs were great. So it's like every one is so different that it's hard to evaluate them as one being better than the other, I guess. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
I also play with a band out of New York called Big Apple Blues, which has a great guitar player in it named Zach Zunis, who I played with in the Janova Magnus band for almost 5 years, which Janova is a singer based out of Los Angeles. So from 2000 till the end of 2014, I was in that band touring the world and the States and Canada and stuff, and that was a lot of fun. And Zach is a great guitar player, and it's really nice to have the opportunity to play with him again in a different situation.
Awesome. How often do you get to do that?
Probably, I would say 2 or 3 times a year. We haven't done anything this year yet. Last year we went to Belgium, we went to Hong Kong, and it seems like we were in Vegas, I think, early in the year. So 3 gigs last year, but this year we haven't done anything yet because the leader of the band has his other thing going on, and he's pretty busy, but it looks like we're going back to Belgium at the end of the year. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, so to back it up a little bit, where are you from?
I'm from Mason, Michigan.
Okay, so right here in the state, actually not far
here.
from where we're at in Lansing now,
Exactly.
actually.
Mason is the county seat of Ingham County, very small little farming community, and I grew up out in the middle of the cornfields, about 4 miles outside of town, in a fairly big family. I had 6 siblings, 5 sisters and a brother, and my 2 parents all in a 2-bedroom house out in the country. So.
Wow. All right. And when did music start becoming a thing for you?
It was always there. My father was a guitar player. He also played a bit of keys, and he loved the Hammond organ, so he had a Hammond when I was a kid, a B3. And always had instruments around the house. My eldest sister played drums. My other sister played saxophone. I think one of them played bass for a minute. Flute, guitar, bassoon. Everybody, there were instruments everywhere, but I seemed to be the only one that kind of took it as a career, I guess.
Sure. So growing up in a place like Mason, which actually it sounds a lot like I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, and growing up in a place like that, it was hard to find places to play or people to play with. Given that you had a large family, that's not my situation, but because you had a large family and everybody played things, was there almost like a Partridge Family-ish, not the bus and the thing, but is that where you guys kind of first started playing together?
A little bit. I definitely, my sister played drums. We had a short-lived band with some of her friends. And then she's the one that got me into the progressive rock thing. And I started writing my own material in that style pretty early on, and then she moved on to other things. She's also a very good artist, so she kind of focused more on that. But she turned me on to a lot of different music. And then, of course, my father's record collection was very eclectic. And getting to the theme of your podcast, that's where I first became exposed to Stevie. And as a child of the 80s, I only knew Stevie Wonder as, I just called to say I love you.
Right. Yeah.
Cheese, right? Mm-hmm. And I had no idea about his earlier career. And when I started digging through my dad's record collection, I found Fulfilling His First Finale, Intervisions, Talking Book, Songs in the Key of Life, the big classic records. And actually, it turned out that those were my mom's records.
Oh, how about that?
And not my dad's. I'm like, dang, my mom was hip. But I think the first one I put on was Talking Book, and it just completely blew my mind. Mm-hmm. Had no idea that anything like that even existed.
That was the same guy,
Yeah.
the I Just Called to Say I Love You guy. Yeah.
It was just amazing. So, yeah, I mean, growing up in the country, not too many people around. I didn't have a lot of friends. Kind of a shy kid. Mm-hmm. And I spent most of my time under headphones listening to records or playing. I mean, that's just kind of what I did.
Yeah. When you were growing up, because of that too, I'd imagine it would be difficult to find places. Well, maybe not to play keyboards. But I mean, like there's like church environments and things like that where typically people that have been coming up as a keyboardist, that's where they kind of start a little bit, I guess. But did you play any other instruments when you were growing up?
I played alto sax in middle school and high school up until my junior year. Tried to get my fingers around guitar, but it never made much sense to me.
Yeah.
Did play drums for a while. Once my sister stopped, I kind of picked it up and played on my own little recordings and stuff. But
oh, cool.
Yeah, I played a little bit of bass guitar. Yeah, but mostly keyboards. I was just fascinated by synthesizers and organ and piano and all the sounds that you could get from it, and also the aspect of recording. I've always been interested in engineering.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So it sounds like when you were growing up and when you were like in your formative sort of like teenage years and stuff that your music education was probably more self-directed than say like going to, like I was in band and my band director had us do these things and I saw that and like more of like a self-directed sort of a journey in a way.
Definitely. I share that with my father. My father was definitely an autodidact. He read voraciously, had his own kooky theories about all sorts of different stuff, a lot of which I don't agree with, but I respect the fact that he came up with his own ideas, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But he was just self-motivated, self-employed, kind of a individualistic type of person, and I definitely inherited that from him. And when it came to music, it was just about figuring it out. I mean, I didn't really ask for help. Sometimes I'd ask my dad for like what chord is this or something like that, but for the most part, I just kind of figured it out.
Right. So when in your development, when did it become clear to you that your pathway was going to be a musician as sort of like, this is what I'm going to do for a living. I'm not just going to do it on the weekend, or I'm not just going to do it as a hobby. This is what I'm going to do for a living.
It was pretty early on, actually. I think when I started making my own songs, which was probably 86, so I was like 8 or 9. Is when I kind of realized, hey, I'm good at this. I can actually probably do this. And I tried to be practical when I got to college, and I studied electrical engineering at Michigan State, and I never graduated because I just wasn't into it. I mean, I love electronics. I actually work on electronics as well, and fix the organs and work on, audio gear and stuff like that. And I enjoy it, but I didn't enjoy the rigid atmosphere of college very much. Like, again, I'm kind of like a self-learner, so for me to sit in a classroom with 200 other people and learn chemistry, which has nothing to do with what I'm trying to learn, it wasn't my thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I didn't do very well in college, and plus I was in every choir I could get into. I was in the jazz program, the fledgling jazz program at the time, playing in combos and stuff. And I should have just studied music, and if I had done that, I probably would have gone to a different school if I was, I don't have a lot of, I tell people this all the time, I'm like, I don't have a lot of regrets in my life at all. I've kind of lived my life the way I've wanted to, but that's one regret I do have is when I got to college, I should have just went for it and, not done the practical thing and just done music.
Yeah, it's like kind of this nag that you probably had the whole time you were in college. Like, I should be doing this.
I should have studied composition or studied pipe organ or studied, jazz more formally, but it's fine. Everything worked out the way it should have. But.
Sure, and being that you're kind of the self-learner anyway, like anything that you could have learned through that environment, you would be able to learn on your own anyway. And it's hard to say how that might have swayed you? Like, where
Well,
was
the
you
thing
going?
about music to me is in my personal experience, I've always learned more on the bandstand than I learned in any classroom, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and getting back to say like Root Doctor, I joined that band in 1999, and those guys never rehearsed. You know, it was just like, okay, you're filling in for the keyboard player, and he's in Japan right now, and here you go. Like, what key is this? I don't know.
Figure it out.
Yeah. I played with a bunch of bands around Lansing that were like that. The guys had been playing together for decades, and I was this, fresh-faced kid.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like, here we go.
Yeah.
And I learned so much about, it trained my ear to pick up intervals better than any ear training class could have,
Yeah.
and how to fit in with a singer and how to fit in with another rhythm player and horns and all that kind of stuff. It was a great classroom, really.
That's very true. I think about my own experience as a saxophonist, and very early in my career, that was kind of the same situation where I'd like be filling in, or I'd just jump on stage with bands, and I had to be able to learn to how to find keys really quick and listen for the progression, and just be able to fall in to what everybody else was doing. And that's something that's really paid off over the years. So like the ability to just kind of like blend in and fold in with what the band's doing really helps out a lot. So it's definitely true. I think the bandstand is really where most stuff really, the things that really matter and the things that really make you a good player are where they really kind of solidify to a certain extent. So yeah.
For the type of music I do, I think that's definitely true. I mean, if you're obviously a classical player, then you need that formal education.
Sure.
As a jazz player, blues, R&B, even rock and roll and country. I mean, one of the first bands I was in when I was 16 was a country western band in Mason. We were playing like beer tents and stuff. And my father was so supportive, hauling the organ around with me and driving me to these gigs and stuff. And again, that band, we actually did rehearse, but not enough. Mm-hmm. And they would pull out songs on the gig that we didn't rehearse, and I had never heard them before in my life. And it's just like, okay, I'll just follow the bass player.
Here we go.
Yeah.
I think it's going to go to the 5 next.
Right,
All right,
exactly.
Here we go.
Yeah. And that's the thing, most of Western music and most pop music, and it's the same changes over and over again, so it's not like, rocket science or anything. So.
That's true. Yeah, that's very, very true. It's like, you can pretty much expect what's going to happen next. And it's like, well, it can either go here, here, here. So let's just kind of listen and see what happens.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. So yeah, that's definitely true. When I have just kind of a note in my question notes here. It just says prog versus blues, jazz, and soul. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to kind of put that into a question. So it's probably not even a versus sort of a thing. It's different things. I mean, it's like, for example, someone might like to eat hot dogs and also go out for steak or sushi or something like that. Like there's this whole broad palette of things. So I'm sure that's probably how you approach it. Maybe, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but is that kind of the way you would think of it? Is that your work as a progressive musician is kind of like a corollary to your work with as a jazz, blues, and soul artist? Like they're just sort of like different worlds that are fun to occupy from time to time? Or
No, actually, it's all the same to me.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you listen to the first Organissimo record that we did way back in 2003, the very first track is called "Meet Me at 11."
Okay.
And it's in 11/8 time. Basically, it's a measure of 5, measure of 6. Back and forth. And I got that idea from listening to progressive rock, but it's in a jazz context. And we have a bunch of tunes on that record that are like that are in odd time signatures. And I've always been fascinated with odd time signatures, and I've always been fascinated with long form compositions. And I think jazz is open to both.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the only difference between, say, progressive rock and jazz is that progressive rock doesn't have as much blues in it that jazz does.
Right.
At least the jazz that I like
Mm-hmm.
has a lot of blues in it. Now, there were obviously progressive rock musicians that started as blues bands, like Jethro Tull,
Mm-hmm.
started as just a straight up blues band and then got into more like folk progressive rock, I guess. And Yes definitely has some soul and blues and stuff in their playing.
Mm-hmm.
Genesis maybe not so much. But to me, it's not necessarily even a different world. It's just a different flavor, like you said. It's not it's all food, it's all music, but it's just a different. What are you hungry for right now? I mean, at the moment right now, I've been delving really heavy into the French turn of the century organ school, classical organ.
Okay, yeah.
Like late 1800s, early 1900s, Vidor and Vierne and César Franck and all these guys, and that stuff. I'd only discovered it maybe a year ago. I had no idea that people wrote that kind of stuff for pipe organ, and it's blowing my mind. But at the same time, there's parts of it and melodies in there and harmonies in there that I'm like, these are jazz harmonies.
Yeah. Using the upper partial chords and
and then there's definitely obviously progressive rock stuff in there too, because those guys stole from classical music like nobody's business.
Well, right,
so it's all interrelated to me. It's all in the same basket. It's just what are you in the mood for? And I try to combine everything into kind of a into a whole, especially jazz. Again, with Organissimo, we try to be not necessarily a standard traditional organ trio doing soul jazz all the time. We definitely do that and we love it, but I want to put other things in there: odd time signatures, weird changes, extended forms that aren't just about soloing all the time.
Right, yeah. Like on the Beatles album, I was trying to think. I think it's a Hard Day's Night or so. There's a couple of songs that have really, really interesting treatments because you would expect it to go this way,
right.
And it kind of takes this whole different turn. Some of the songs, like that's how I would expect if an organ trio played a Beatles tune, that's what it would sound like. And then there were other ones where it was just like, I think "And I Love Her" was, there were some really interesting chord choices and stuff that I really like. I went, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah, we try to strike that balance. I mean, we definitely, "Can't Buy Me Love" on that record is a straight up shuffle.
Yeah.
That's how they would have done it in the 60s or something, But then something like "Taxman," we put that in 7, made it like more modern and funky. And then "And I Love Her," we reharmonized quite a bit of that. It's just it's a balance between I never want things to sound pretentious, and I don't want them to sound like I'm trying too hard.
Yeah.
So it's a balance between being slick and being honest.
Yeah. Where did the idea, the inspiration to do a Beatles like not soul jazz, because it's obviously other things in that, but where did the inspiration for that record come from?
It just came from having a conversation with the guys. We were driving back up from I think Tupelo, Mississippi. We did a festival down there, and passing the time on the drive, and we were just listening to our favorite Beatles songs, one after another. Like, oh, what's your favorite? Okay, let's put that on. What's your favorite? And in listening to these tunes, we both all three of us actually came to the conclusion together. We're like, man, we should do some of these songs. Yeah, they're so ripe for reinterpretation. There's so much that you could do with them harmonically, and of course the melody. I mean, McCartney and Lennon were masters of melody. So they're just ready for somebody to do a project like this and not just do straight up covers. That's one thing I didn't want to do, is just do like instrumental versions of the tunes, same arrangements and same chords and all that.
Yeah, it would be interesting. One of the things I was thinking of as I was driving here and listening to the record is it would be interesting to get like Ringo and Paul's response. Like, I feel like how they would like. I mean, I know it's like it's kind of like people always talk about. Well, what if Stevie hears your show? And you're like, yeah, right. That's never gonna happen.
Yeah,
but
you never know. But that's the thing. I mean, I do know a couple. I'm twice removed from members of Paul's band, so you never know.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I remember a story I read one time with Jason Faulkner, musician from LA. He had done 2 of these Bedtime for the Beatles albums.
Oh yeah,
and they're just like he threw them out on iTunes. I don't even know if you can buy them on CD or not, but like he'd put them out there. And they were just sort of these things that he did. You're like, well, I like the melodies, and I thought it'd be interesting to interpret it that way. So I put out, didn't expect anything out of it. And he was in the studio either with like Beck or Air or something, and he passed Paul in the hallway, and like they pass each other, and then Paul turns around and he's like, bedtime with the Beatles. Right on, man. And he gives him like the McCartney thumbs up that he always gives. And Faulkner was like,
oh my God.
Like, I can't believe that just happened. You know? So yeah, it'd be pretty interesting, you know, like if something like that happened,
it'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And same to you for the Stevie thing. And we've thought about, the guitarist and I in Organissimo thought about doing a Stevie project for a while too. Because he's got so many tunes, and a lot of tunes have not been, a lot of people have done his tunes, but there's a lot of tunes they haven't done.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's one thing that sort of I didn't expect out of this podcast was that it's exposed me to all these tunes that I'd never heard before. Like, you know, I thought I pretty much knew most of his songs, you know, but especially like that like 80s, 90s block where I just kind of went, you know, it's whatever, it's Kurzweil era, whatever, you know, like, and even then there's tunes, you know, like Moon Blue and,
that's a great song,
you know, all these great tunes. And I'm like, wow, I missed all this stuff. And people are like bringing them out as they're like, well, I think I'm going to do this song. What is that? You know, to go look it up. And so that's been a nice side thing for me, I guess, is that I'm like, my vocabulary of Stevie tunes is expanding. Yeah. You know,
I think the thing that's amazing about him is that you just know that he's probably got a vault with like 1,000 tunes in it that nobody's even ever heard.
Mm-hmm. Like he's the silent prince.
Yeah, exactly.
In a way. You know?
I mean, I bet that he probably writes 100 tunes a year, and they're just sitting there, and you know, for whatever reason, he just sits on them.
Yeah.
You know, and there's probably some incredible songs in there.
Yeah, I wonder, like from those, especially like the '70s records, you know, when they were just, you know, he's in the studio for 2 years for Songs of the Key of Life. Yeah. Like what's sitting from that session that they didn't use, you know? Because
there's probably some good stuff. I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's definitely true. So, let's talk Hammond organ a little bit, because that's obviously been a big part of your voice. I might be mistaken, but have you worked with the Hammond Company too, like as sort of a, I don't know, like have with a sponsorship, or like that you've kind of consulted with Hammond?
Yeah, well, they endorsed me as an artist. I've been with them since 2007, so about 10 years now, and they've used me as kind of a consultant as well on some of the new products. You know, get me down to Chicago and try them out and tell them what's wrong and what's right. And I've done trade shows for them, you know, the NAMM shows and stuff like that. So it's a good relationship, and they're a great company, very small company. Most people don't realize how small the company is. And they do, you know, they make some great stuff. I use the digital Hammonds on the road. If I can't get, you know, a B3 as backline, and even sometimes when I do get B3s as backlines, they're so poorly maintained that I wind up using my digital one anyway. So
right, yeah.
But Hammond, they've been very supportive of me, and I think the relationship is pretty mutually beneficial. You know. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's nice to have the support. Of a company that, you know, like be like, I don't know, being Steely Dan and having a relationship with the Rhodes, you know, company or something like that. You know, something that's just so tied in with their sound so tightly. The one thing I was thinking about, and it's one of those things where I'm not 100% sure how to phrase the question, so kind of stick with me a little bit. But when you think of the Hammond organ, it's like sort of this iconic, unchanging instrument in a way, like a violin almost, in a way, where it's this thing, you know, drawbars and you know, the motor and the Leslie speaker and what have you. Like it's sort of like just sort of this iconic thing, and yet it's also something that is kind of like a well that technology keeps coming back to, you know, back all the way into the 80s when you had like the Korg CX model, like sort of, you know, trying to simulate it. And so it'd be interesting to get your insights on how technology, as it's evolved over the last, you know, 10 years or 15 years or whatever, how that's sort of impacted and blended with an instrument like the Hammond organ that's sort of this iconic sort of a thing.
Sure. Well, the Hammond was the first electric organ. It's actually electromechanical in the way that it functions. But it was originally designed to emulate a pipe organ. and it does that quite poorly, actually. But the good news is that it does it in a way that's unique, and it became its own instrument because of that. It's kind of like the Rhodes. I mean, the Rhodes was made by Harold Rhodes to be a field piano in the Army, so that they didn't have to haul around an acoustic piano, which is heavy and goes out of tune all the time and is not very roadworthy. And so it comes from wanting to emulate a piano, but it doesn't sound like a piano. I mean, it does and it doesn't. It's got the same attack and decay that a piano does, but the timbre is completely different.
Right.
Likewise, the Hammond organ is designed to emulate a pipe organ, and it has some of the same features and characteristics as a pipe organ, but it doesn't sound like a pipe organ. You know, it sounds like itself. And then, of course, when you pair it with the spinning speaker, the Leslie, it doesn't sound anything like a pipe organ at that point. It's its own thing. And yeah, it's taken a long time to get to the point where the digital equivalents are playable. And that's because the limitations that they had in the 1930s when they designed the thing actually give it so much of its character that if you don't take those limitations and design them into a digital system which has no limitations and is also perfect, if you don't take some of those imperfections and put them into it, then it doesn't sound right. And I think that was the biggest hurdle for even the new Hammond company to get over, is to realize that we don't want it to sound perfect. We want it to sound funky.
Yeah.
We want it to have imperfections and quirks and weirdness about it, right?
Yeah.
Like the real ones.
Yeah, that's true, because, you know, if you play, like, you could put 4 Rhodes pianos in a room and they'd all sound a little different.
Yeah.
Or you could put 4 Hammond organs and they could all be even the same model and the same cabinet and the same year, and they'd sound a little different depending on how they were maintained or where they were or all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that character, that element of character.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's one thing that, getting on kind of a sidetrack, that's one thing that bugs me about a lot of modern recordings is you can tell that most modern recordings are not using a real piano. I'm talking like pop and stuff, you know. They're not using a real piano, they're using a plug-in, and everybody uses the same plug-in and it all sounds the same. Whereas if you listen to older recordings before digital pianos, you know, they had to mic up a piano, and pianos sound different. The mics make the piano sound different. The room makes the piano sound different. So even if the piano wasn't perfect, like on some of these jazz recordings, the older jazz recordings, you know, the piano might be slightly out of tune here and there, and the unison might be out or something. But that gives it so much character, and nowadays it's just boring.
Yeah.
Like everything sounds the same.
That's true. I know that I've struggled with that with piano sounds a lot. It just specifically that, like, it's hard to find a piano sound that you want to play. Like they all just sort of like, you don't feel like you're playing a piano. You feel like you're playing like the sound of a piano on a recording instead.
And that's where the Hammond sound was for a long time. Like you said, you had the stuff in the 80s. And to be fair, in the 80s, the organ kind of died. There wasn't a lot of people using it at the time. It started to come back in the 90s with Joy DeFrancesco. And then companies started to make organ clones. Like Roland had a couple. Nord came around. Hammond started doing it again. Korg reissued the CX3 as a digital thing. And now there's quite a few companies making Hammond-style organs out there. And everybody's kind of trying to outdo each other in terms of what I was talking about before, the imperfections, you know. So we've come a long way, and it's actually a good time to be a Hammond organ player because, you know, there's such good options out there for something lighter weight that you don't have to haul around the 400-pound behemoth anymore to get a similar sound. Now, everything, of course, is a compromise, and it's never going to be 100% like the real thing. And when you do get to play the real thing and it's been properly maintained and it sounds great and the Leslie is powerful and kicking and everything, there's no better sound than that.
Right.
But those are few and far between. If you consider that the last B3 that ran on that came off the production line came off in like 74, 75. So the latest, you know, the youngest Hammond out there is the youngest B3 out there is 40 years old.
Right.
That's kind of where we are. I mean, there's some great sounding organs, but they require a lot of work and maintenance to get them up to snuff. And then if they're on the road, then you have to, you know, make sure they're roadworthy and carry spare parts with you and stuff like that. So
it's kind of like Rhodes and Whirlies and stuff like that, where, like, you know, they started remaking the Rhodes, in the 90s, I think, right? Late maybe early 2000s. Yeah. But most people, if they're carrying one, carry like a Mark I or a Mark II, and they're 40 years old or something like that. So yeah,
I've been redoing a lot of Rhodes lately for people, and I've used mine a couple times for live gigs. But man, it's you have to really be dedicated to do that. It's so heavy, and it's goes out of tune if you bang it around a lot. And to be honest, the Rhodes sounds in most modern keyboards are really good. So
yeah, it's kind of true. Like I had a Mark I and decided to sell it because the Rhodes sound in main stage is pretty good. You know, it's like it wasn't so much different that it made carrying around 160-pound keyboard or whatever it is make it worthwhile, really. So
for live stuff, I think it, the modern stuff sounds great. Now for recording purposes, I have done a record with like a digital Hammond and it came out great. I actually fooled some people with it that thought it was the real thing.
Really?
And the reason I used it is because it had MIDI capabilities and I was layering stuff with synthesizers and stuff. But for the most part, I used the real deal on recordings, and likewise Rhodes, I use the real deal on Rollator. I try to use real instruments when I can. Piano, if I can get away with it, just because again, it gives it that character that makes it sound different than everything else that's out there.
Sure, yeah, that individual sort of a characteristic too. So
yeah, getting back to the Hammond Company, they're making some great products. I'm proud to be endorsed by them. I'm proud to use their stuff on the road, and they've been very supportive. It's a good company.
So and since you said you were at NAMM representing Hammond, have you ever run into Stevie at NAMM? Because I know like everyone's
he came to the Hammond booth. I think that was 2 years ago when I was there, and he's also got this enormous entourage following him around, and he's got a handler that is close by all the time, and I didn't really want to bug him and try to weasel my way up there, but I was 6 feet away from him watching him play, I hope to meet him in person someday. Again, I have a couple connections to him on the professional side. Like for instance, his trumpet player that tours with him, Dwight Adams, is on my Dirty Fingers record. So.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I've run into Dwight a couple times at NAMM, and actually he was playing with Stevie there the last time I was there. So one of these days maybe.
Yeah, that would be pretty fun. Because
just to shake his hand and thank him for the music and tell him what an inspiration he's been.
Because what do you say? I mean, there's times where I've thought about like, boy, I'd really like to meet, whoever, Tom Petty or Andy Partridge or any number of like heroes that I have. But then I'm like, what would I even say to that person? I mean, like all except thank you, basically, and that's it. I mean, like we're gonna have a deep conversation about music.
I did a recording project with his bassist, Nathan Watts, a couple of years ago. It never came out, but Nathan's from Lansing, so we were talking about Lansing, and he's still got family here, and he was a super nice guy. And I'm like, man, it'd be cool to like, if they're ever in Michigan again, just to call Nathan and be like, hey, bro.
What's up? You got any backstage passes?
Right, exactly.
I know, like I've been trying to reach out to Greg Fillinganes because I thought he'd be really interesting to talk to.
Yeah, sure.
And, because he was in Stevie's band.
You should talk to, I'm good friends with Ronnie Foster.
Okay, who's Ronnie?
Ronnie played on Songs in the Key of Life on at least one track. He played organ. He's an organist.
Oh, cool.
Played with George Benson for years and years and years. And
that'd be awesome.
Harvey Mason and stuff. But he knows Stevie. Stevie and he are really good friends.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be fun. I'd love to talk to somebody like that.
I'll put you in touch with him.
Very cool.
A really cool guy.
Well, thank you. Well, actually, that's kind of a good. We're sort of working back into Stevie a little bit. And I mean, I guess the first and most obvious question is like, what would you consider? And we kind of talked about it a little bit when you discovered the 70s records in your parents' record collection. When did Stevie really start to become a musical influence on you?
I think probably late high school.
Yeah,
because that's when I discovered the records. I was obsessed with progressive rock starting in my teens, up until probably 16 or 17, because at that point I had heard everything that I could hear. This, of course, this is before the internet, so you could, some of the more obscure bands I couldn't even find recordings of.
Sure, yeah.
But I had heard, all the mainstays and listened to the records a billion times, and I was like, okay, what's next? So digging through my dad's collection, that I got turned on to Jimmy Smith first and foremost, and that totally blew my mind and got me started in the jazz organ thing. And then I also heard Stevie, and especially like Songs in the Key of Life. That record was like incredible. I couldn't believe it. You know, and to me, talking about musical worlds and stuff, that record is not that far removed from the progressive rock stuff.
It's quite true, yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's very experimental. There's lots of really cool synthesizer sounds on it, recording techniques, and of course, you know, the double album type of thing where, you know, that record completely opened up a whole different world for me. Like, and then of course I found out that he played, you know, 90% of the instruments on and drums, and maybe not on that record, but on his other records he played a lot of drums and you know, and arranged all this stuff, and I fell in love with his voice and his ability to improvise with his voice, and you know, that melodic sense of his that translates into his solos and stuff too, and his harmonica playing is. I don't like a lot of harmonica players at all. It's not my favorite instrument.
Yeah.
But I could listen to him play harmonica all day.
Right, and you can pick him out right away.
Oh,
like you hear him play something, you're like, that's Stevie. You know, like exactly. He's got this voice on that instrument that you can't deny, basically. Yep. So yeah.
So then I dug through his back catalog when I got into college and picked up like Music from My Mind and some of the really early Motown stuff, and I think in terms of like an influence on me, I think he influenced me in terms of wanting to write melodies. I never considered myself a very good melodic writer when I was in high school and college and stuff, and I really worked hard on that in the intervening years to like studying melodies and how they work and what makes a good melody and intervals and that kind of stuff, and I listened to a lot of his music and took it apart, and I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from it is his sense of melodicism.
Yeah, both.
And it's a natural melodicism. You know, it's like it's not forced. I don't like music where it sounds like, you know, somebody's trying too hard to be slick or something. And that I don't get that from his stuff at all. It's all exactly what it should be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it comes very, very organically.
Yeah.
You know, like and his melodic sense as a singer is very, very similar to his melodic sense as a harmonica player. You know, the things he sings and the things he plays are very similar. It's like Louie Armstrong, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, where just that's his voice.
That's a good comparison. Yeah, he is kind of like a modern Louie Armstrong in many ways, you know.
Yeah.
Kind of a child star and kind of redefined, you know, a whole genre of music.
Yeah. Yeah, for all y'all listeners out there that are thinking Louie Armstrong and you're like, what a wonderful girl world guy. It's like, look a little earlier.
Look a little deeper.
He's a badass.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's really that's pretty interesting. I wondered like if his sort of pushing technologically, because it was one of the things that maybe Stevie doesn't get as much credit as he should for the way that he was really pushing technology, even into the 80s and 90s, when maybe the music might have not has been quite as, I don't know, creatively challenging as some of the stuff in the 70s, but he was still, you know, pushing technology with Raymond Kurzweil and all that stuff. And then even up to now, you know, like he showed up on the Grammys playing with Daft Punk, and he's got that thing, the arpeggio or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was like, I remember seeing it on TV and going, what is that? Yeah. What the hell is that thing? And like had to go look it up. And
I think that's why he enjoys the NAMM show so much, is that it keeps him abreast of what's going on in the industry. Like he spent the booth right across from us that year was the Roger Lynn booth, and Roger Lynn has this Lynn pad thing, which is kind of like a matrixy type of interface for playing. You know, you can play notes on it, or you can use it as a controller or whatever. And Stevie spent a lot of time over there messing with that thing.
Yeah,
because it's something new, you know.
Yeah, or like, you know, they have those new key, like I use Air Bunnies like quotes to call them keyboards, because they're like kind of more than keyboards. Like they have those like soft keyboards where you can there's like a Z axis as well as that. Yep. And then of course the thing that Jordan Rudess kind of pioneered, that I don't remember. Yeah, the Hack and Continuum.
Yeah.
And things like that, and how, you know, he like stuff like that seems to end up in Stevie's hands.
Oh yeah, sure.
More often than not, and he ends up using it, and then people go, "What is that thing? What the hell is he doing?" You know.
Well, it's you know, getting back to his recording techniques, I think it's easy for us in 2017 to forget how difficult it was to make a record in the 70s, technologically.
Yeah.
Studios were very, very limited in what they could do. I mean, multi-track just came out a few years before that. The ability to record separate tracks at separate times, in fact, in my studio right here, I have one of the first 16-track 2-inch machines, the Scully 116. That Pink Floyd used one on Metal, and 16 tracks. I mean, that was huge at the time.
Right. Yeah.
And then they eventually did 24, and then you could link two 24-track machines together and get 48 and that kind of stuff. But even with all those tracks, it was still, people in a room playing music, and there was no digital editing like we have today. You couldn't take I bummed that trumpet note, so I'm going to take the note from when I played it again.
Right.
2 measures later and just pop that over there. No, you couldn't do that stuff. Splicing tape was kind of a last resort. You know what I mean?
It's funny showing people now, teenagers and kids in their 20s. But anyway, showing people that have never experienced tape and showing them a video or something of somebody splicing tape and how almost, I don't know, medieval it looks.
It is. I mean, it's amazing what people were able to do. You listen to Stevie's records, or you listen to those Yes records where they're doing these 23-minute long pieces, man, and there might be one cut in there where or maybe they pieced it together, but I think a lot of that stuff they just played it.
Yeah, they
played it down. There was no studio trickery. There's no auto-tune. There's no beat detective. There's no,
Yeah, things changed. I noticed that in the 70s particularly, maybe even in the 80s, but in the 70s particularly, bands, when they would make a new record, they would tour it first.
Yeah.
And just kind of workshop it on the road. Because I've got tapes of Pink Floyd doing Dark Side of the Moon in 72 and whatnot, before they went into Abbey Road to record it.
So they knew how to play it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that when they got in the studio, they didn't have to waste time trying to figure, because it was so expensive to be in a studio in the first place. Yeah.
No, it's remarkable when you listen to some of those old recordings and what they were able to achieve with a limited number of tracks and limited technology. I'll never forget my father. He passed away in 2008 while we were working on the Groovadelphia record with Organissimo, and this is the one I was using the digital organ with MIDI, layering synthesizer sounds into the organ and stuff. And it was the first first record that I recorded here in my home studio completely, the whole record, which is a big step for me. And I had him over probably only a month or so before he passed away to listen to what we were doing. And the first thing he said was he goes, "Man, this is pretty forward-thinking stuff. Are you worried about alienating your fan base?" I'm like, "What fan base? We have 1,000 people that maybe know who we are, so no, I'm not worried about that at all."
No, not really.
And the second thing he said, when I showed him what you could do in the computer and the editing and the plugins and all this and that, he was just staring at it with his mouth open. He's like, "This is incredible." I said, "Yeah, it's pretty amazing what you can do now." And he said, I'll never forget this. He said, "There's no excuse anymore."
That's really good. Yeah, that's really good. There's no excuse anymore.
There's no excuse not to create what you want to create, because you have the tools at your fingertips to do it. If you want to produce a movie, if you want to make a book, write a book, or a graphic novel, or obviously photography or art or music or whatever you want to do, there's no excuse anymore. You have the tools available. He said, if I would have had this when I was your age, he's like, I don't know what
That's true. I mean, I even think about it because we're roughly about the same age. I'm 43 and
40.
You're 40. So yeah, I think about the things that you can do for free online, and oh my God, could you imagine if you could have done that? When we were
I was a kid, man, it was a novelty to bring in a paper for school that was printed.
Yeah.
We had a Commodore 64 with a freaking Okidata dot matrix printer. And in Mason, I was one of the few kids that actually was able to print out a report. Everybody else was handwritten. And now you can get online, use Google Docs, type up whatever you want. email it or make a PDF of it or print it at Kinko's or whatever. You could write it on your damn cell phone if you wanted, with
That's
a
right.
Bluetooth keyboard or something,
It's totally right. I mean, I've always, whenever I, talk to students about that, I try and impress that on them. It's like, guys, you have no idea. Like,
no idea.
Even to like do a cassette 4-track demo when we were teenagers.
That was a huge deal.
It was expensive.
I had people that hired me to record their bands in high school because I had a 4-track reel to reel. And that was a big deal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because everything was super expensive. Everything.
Mics were super expensive, and cables and stands,
and now it's so democratizing that like you can go online and literally like you can have a multi-track recorder for free. You can have MIDI sequencing for free. Everything. It's all for free. And it's pretty amazing.
What isn't free is the talent.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And not to be an old curmudgeon or anything, but I think. Well, I was going to say that there's a lot of crap out there, but I think that's true of any era.
Yeah.
Is there's a lot of crap out there. What does give me hope is that, I've done a couple of these jazz camps with some young kids, and there's a lot of kids out there that are players, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, serious players. Now, how many of them are going to turn into the next Stevie Wonder? Probably not many. How many are going to write songs that are worth a hill of beans? I don't know, but they can play.
Yeah.
Which we need. We need good musicians that can play live. And
that's for sure. Yeah, I often wonder, and it's like I kind of check myself to make sure I'm not wandering into, get off my lawn territory. But there's that, the way that the industry has changed.
Yeah.
As far as the monetization and how hard it is to make any money doing anything as a musician.
Or as a creative person in general.
Yeah, that's right. And how that's influencing or not influencing, as the case might be, for people to want to go the extra mile and find the new sounds and do the new things.
There's always going to be those people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worried about that. And I try to look on the bright side of the democratization of creative technology, in that if more and more people are creating something and being creative and expressing themselves and getting this stuff out in a creative way, then that's less people doing it in a destructive way.
Well, that's quite true. Yeah, that's very true.
So even if you're not very good, or even if you're an amateur, I think just do it. Write your music, sing your songs. I don't care if it's good or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Say your truth, basically.
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah.
Because it's better than the alternative. The alternative is to either be a destructive person or to be unhappy because you've got stuff to say and you can't say it because you don't feel worthy or whatever.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that crap. Just do it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So speaking of that, well, kind of, I don't know exactly, but so your songs that we're doing today, let's talk about the tunes that you're doing. So
I thought I would do off of Songs in the Key of Life, Another Star. We play this one in Organissimo often. And we do kind of a classic soul jazz arrangement of it, swinging.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I can pull it off, I haven't played it in a while. I practiced it a little yesterday. I'd like to do one of his lesser known pieces off the album he did for the movie, for The Secret Life of Plants, called Come Back as a Flower.
Right on. So let's talk a little bit about that tune, because I'm admittedly, I haven't heard it. I meant to listen to it beforehand, but I'm kind of glad that I didn't in a way, because it lets me kind of approach it fresh.
Yeah, I
guess in a way. So so that record, Journey to the Secret Life of Plants, it was right after Songs in the Key of Life. And I don't know if I've said it on the podcast, but I know when I've been talking about Stevie with people before, I felt like it was one of those points where, like, Songs of the Key of Life was such an achievement, and it's like you kind of get full of that "what can't I do" energy, and then that leads to Journey to the Secret Life of Plants, which is a great album, but it's not like people don't listen to that one very much because it's sort of hard to get into.
Yeah, I think it's pretty underrated. I think there's actually some. I mean, not all of it is genius level stuff, but there's some really amazing songs on there.
Mm-hmm.
Admittedly, I haven't listened to it as much as the other stuff either, but I do think it's. I don't know if it was necessarily I can do anything type of attitude. I think it was more like, I've done this. It was extremely popular. Now I'm going to do something that I want to do. You know what I mean? Like
I've bought my ticket to be able to do the things
Yeah.
that I really, really want to do, basically by making this huge Super Smash record.
yeah.
You know.
He's proved himself. He doesn't have to prove himself anymore. Now he can just kind of do what he wants to do.
That's true. And at that point in his career, that's when he had his own studio, because he had his own studio for Songs of the Key of Life too, didn't he? Did he have Wonderland at that point? Or
I think so. I think that was recorded in a bunch of different studios, but I think, well, I don't know exactly, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that.
Yeah.
But it's somewhere around
I know
that
that
time.
I know that record was a real challenge to make because he had Motown breathing down his throat to deliver it, and he wanted to spend some more time and make sure things were right and stuff. And then he had to renegotiate his contract with Motown and ask for some obscene amount of money that Berry Gordy didn't want to give him, but couldn't turn it down because it's Stevie,
Right. Yeah.
And it turned out to be a huge hit record. So, yeah.
Wow, far out. So how about this tune? Is it, what's it
It's
about?
sung
What's
by
it-
his wife at the time, Sarita.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the lyrics just deal with, wanting to come back in the next life as a flower rather than a human being with all our trials and tribulations, and just come back as something simple and beautiful.
And the song
And the song is simple and beautiful.
Simple and Beautiful.
Yeah.
There we go. So awesome. Well, let's take a listen to Come Back as a Flower. All right, so second song, Another Star, which probably pretty familiar to most people, especially if you know Songs in the Key of Life. But it's not necessarily a hit from that album, but it's of course because it's on that album.
I think it ends the album, doesn't it?
I know it's on the second album or the second record.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the end because I think it isn't Easy Going Evening or whatever it's called, that Mama's Call, wah, 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 is on the very end of the record. But I think it's on
close.
side 4.
Yeah,
it's pretty close to the end. Yeah. And it's kind of the big blowout, like he's a Mr. Know-It-All,
exactly,
kind of blowout song, like he kind of likes to have on his records. What about that song appealed to you that made you?
I just like the melody of it. Mm-hmm. It's very jazzy. It's very kind of a classic type Tim Panelli American Songbook type of melody and form. The chords are very lots of 2-5-1s and stuff. So it's perfect jazz vehicle.
Yeah, I love that. I love the chords in the bridge
of
that song. I like where he goes with it because it isn't what you'd expect necessarily, but it's a nice counterpoint to the rest of the song because the rest of it's minor and then that sort of major, kind of juxtaposition in there too. When you play it with Organissimo, like when you do live gigs and you play that song, do people recognize it immediately or do they know it? Or?
I think the older generation does, yeah, definitely. And we usually follow it up with another Stevie tune. We usually do like Golden Lady or something after that. So. So we kind of do our little mini Stevie set.
Nice. That's another song, and that's from sort of same, I don't know, like genre really, or that same sort of style where it's like sort of the Tin Pan Alley chords and it's beautiful melody and really cool harmonic. Progression in there and stuff. It's pretty cool.
I think Intervisions might be it for me. Intervisions or Fulfilling His First Finale I can't decide between those two as my favorite Stevie record.
Yeah, for me for a long time it was Talking Book, but I'm kind of becoming more of an Intervisions.
Yeah, Intervisions is just genius level stuff from start to finish.
It's amazing. It's totally amazing that in the record the songs on that record. That they all came from one person and that a lot of them were played completely by one person. We were talking in the first podcast about him as a drummer. And that's kind of that's one of my pipe dreams is that someday I'd be in a band successful enough that we could have Stevie play drums.
Yeah, there you go.
On a song because it's cool. He just has that sound.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. But yeah, it's cool. I love that whole record because it's just so... I don't know. It's like you said. It's just genius level stuff, and he pulls off things that if anybody else tried what he did, it would fall apart. Yeah. They would completely miserably fail at it, and he makes it happen. Like that big long extended break and Living for the City. That if anybody else tried to do that, I think it would come off kind of badly. Right. Pretty much anything else, but it's really really interesting. Cool. So do you find that Another Star is a pretty fully orchestrated song on Songs in the Key of Life? Do you find that there's any challenges making that translate to a smaller group?
You definitely have to pare it down. I mean, we I think it helps to put it in a different feel, and so we put it in kind of like a kunga beat type of that kind of swing groove to kind of just thin it out a little bit and if we tried to do it like kind of a samba like he was doing it, I think it wouldn't work very well.
Yeah, it'd be difficult because there's so many different elements going on, like the background vocals and the horns and all that stuff going on. Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing it, so let's check it out. Cool. So to finish up, as we do on every episode of the Year of Living Stevie, we usually end up with a some sort of message to Stevie, just in case he were to happen to wander upon this podcast and wonder what it's all about.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hate when I pun and I don't really mean it. I love it and I hate it alternately. I don't know how to really react to it, frankly. But if you had a message to send to Stevie, you'd mentioned that at the Nom show he was there, and it's like you didn't really want to bug him. If you did get a chance to bug him, or if you weren't such a kind and polite person and just ran up to him, hey buddy, what's up? Like, what would you want Stevie to hear from you?
Well, first and foremost, I just thank him for all the music and for being such a positive influence in the world. And and influence on me personally. But then I would hope that we could sit down and just talk about music, like how he approaches writing a song. Whether he starts with a melody first, or chords first, or lyrics first, or an idea first, or whether he sits down specifically to write something. Because I do all those things. Sometimes I want to write something very specific, so I'll sit down with the intent of writing something, or I'll have a lyrical idea, so I'll start with that, or I'll have a melodic idea, so I'll start with that. And I'm just curious, like, how he goes about it.
I would say almost like, I know some friends of mine, and I have this like list of people, if you could have dinner with like one person, who would it be? And for years it was always like Tom Petty. I felt like I would love to sit down to dinner with Tom Petty, because I just feel like he'd have a lot of really like wise things to say. But I think you could very easily swap that with Stevie. Like, it would be really great to sit down with Stevie and just have a meal and just sort of talk about, he and I think, are politically aligned, musically aligned. He's a very religious man. I'm not necessarily religious, but we could talk about spirituality and that kind of stuff too. But music is the great equalizer. I mean, music is like a universal language, so I think we could definitely hit it off on that regard. Yeah, that would be sweet.
I'd just talk about, I'd love to hear some stories about the studio. I talked to Ronnie about it a bit, about him playing on I think he played on Summer Soft. Okay. On that record, and we talked a little bit about that experience and how it was in the studio with Stevie, and just like where the industry is headed in his estimation, and I don't know, just man, there's so much you could talk about with that guy.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Yeah, I know Dennis told some great stories. Dennis Coffey, when he was here, told some really fun studio stories about Stevie, like trying to show Pistol and Uriel how to play a drum part,
and they couldn't play,
and they couldn't do it, so they just had him do it. That sort of stuff. It was a really great story. It would be really interesting to get his read on
growing up. One thing that'd be interesting to talk to him about is growing up here, because he went to the School for the Blind, and how that was, and then his experience in Detroit, and it's just Saginaw, of course, and he's a hometown boy, so like all that sort of stuff. That would be pretty sweet. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Jim, thank you very much for being our guest today. I really appreciate it. And thanks for the songs. I'm sure, everybody's going to love listening to that when it comes out. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Do you have any upcoming shows or any events coming up that you'd like to plug?
Sure. We're doing kind of a Northern Michigan tour the last week of July with Organissimo. We're going to be in Pentwater, Baldwin, Reed City, Manistee, the last week. So just kind of look up on our website, organissimo.org, and you'll see where we are. We're doing the Old Town Jazz Festival in Lansing.
It's always awesome.
August 4th. That should be a good show. What else? I'm touring with Laura Ray and the Caesars in September, kind of like a Midwestern thing. Doing some Chicago dates in September with them. So it's all on that stuff will be on my website, which is jimalfredson.com.
Okay.
But it's a pretty busy summer. I'm kind of all over the place. So.
Right on. And we'll stick those in the show notes. So if people want to look up those two websites,
cool.
That'll be in the show notes so they can.
And I'll probably be at NAMM in January too in Anaheim. So.
Fantastic.
Come to the Hammond booth and say hi.
If you happen to be at NAMM, come and see Jim at the Hammond booth. They have goodies. They have like stickers and junk.
Oh, I'm sure they will. Yeah.
Awesome. I kind of like swag.
Yeah.
It's pretty sweet. So, all right. Well, once again, thank you very much for being our guest today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, that's our show today. Thank you so much to Jim Alfredson. It was a great pleasure meeting you and hanging out with you in your studio, and those tracks are just magic. Absolutely fantastic. In 2 weeks, our guests on the show are going to be Elsie Binks, which is a rock band from the Detroit area, fronted by the amazing and wonderful Aaron Accomando. They're going to do a couple songs for you and talk a little bit about their Stevie connections, which will be a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to that. If you like to keep up with us, of course, you can follow us online in a number of different places. First and best place probably to go to is either the Abnormal Entertainment website. It's abnormalentertainment.com, just the way you would expect it to be spelled. And you can find our show and various other shows. There's all kinds of cool stuff. There's political shows, there's comic books and movies and TV and all kinds of great stuff. So there's something for pretty much everybody at Abnormal Entertainment. So I would encourage you to go and check that out. Thanks to Kevin and David for hosting the show and getting it out there so that people can hear it. You can also follow us on Facebook. That's where a majority of our updates come from. So if you want to do that, you can go to Facebook and then find Year of Living Stevie. The Year of Living Stevie. And you'll find our webpage there. And there's always stuff going up there that you might want to know to keep up. You could also go to Twitter. Our handle on Twitter is Living Stevie. So you can check us out there. And if you have anything, any questions, comments, what have you, you can visit on Gmail and send me an email at livingstevie@gmail.com. If you would like to buy a Stevie is the Truth sticker, which is super awesome. If you check out the Facebook page, there's a picture or two on there. If you'd like one of those, they're $3 sent directly to your door, or if you find me in person, they're $2 if I just hand it over to you. They're super awesome. You can stick them on your car. You can stick them, well, wherever you want to stick them. I'm not telling you how to live your life. That's not cool. If you would like one of those, you can either hit the Facebook page and buy one there, or if you would, if you want, you can Gmail me, and I can get something to you that way as well. So thanks again. Glad that you were here with us, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Take it easy. Stevie is the truth.
Mr. Stevie Wonder. Mr. Stevie Wonder. Mr. Stevie Wonder.
Head to abnormalentertainment.com for all of our podcasts and blogs. Go to cinemaheadcheese.com for our movie reviews and news. Don't forget our YouTube channels, Abnormal Podcast and Cinema Head Cheese. Get us on Twitter, @AbnormalPodcast, and find all of our shows and Abnormal Entertainment on Facebook.
You've been listening to the Abnormal Entertainment Network.